Good afternoon, everyone. It's so lovely to have you all here at Garma, and I've just arrived at Garma, so if you you weren't here last year, my name is Shelley Ware and I'm one of the MCs here at the Key Forum, so very excited for the Garma ahead. I would like to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians and thank them for caring for this beautiful country that we're here today and that we get to enjoy because of their care and love, and that we take on that cultural responsibility to care for this country too, and our time here at Garma to make sure that we leave it well and safe in our time. And thank you, and pay my respects to all of the elders that are with us today, past and present. It is a real honour to be here, and I'm really looking forward to this panel, and this is all about what we've been talking about, the referendum. So on the 14th of October in 2023, it was a century-long journey towards constitutional recognition. We saw it end. So 10 months on, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who have lived with that rejection of the voice, but also retain the determination to make change, to speak about the future. And we're really lucky today to have the amazing people that are going to speak to that, which will be led by a panel that will be led by ABC's Insiders, David Spears. So if we could please welcome David, he's going to welcome the panel. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Can I just add my acknowledgement to the traditional custodians. Thank you so much for your generosity, for having us all here at this very special place, and for inviting me to do this afternoon. I'm really looking forward to this. We've got an excellent panel and a really timely discussion, I think, to explore, yes, some difficult issues, but also try and get into this pathway forward. It is interesting that in the day and a bit that I've been here and the conversations that I've had so far, and looking forward to a lot more this weekend, one of the things that keeps coming up is this silence, as it's described. I think even in the Garma booklet, it's described as a deafening silence in the last nearly 10 months since that referendum. So look, maybe we break that silence a little bit in this session that we're going to get into here. I'm David Spears from the ABC. We're doing Insiders here this weekend as well with the Prime Minister and a terrific panel Sunday morning. Come and watch us do the show if you'd like. It'll be 8:30 local time. But let me come and grab a seat up on the front table. I'll introduce everybody we've got here. Of course, the new Minister for Indigenous Australians, Malarndirri McCarthy. Let's give her a round of applause. You're how many days into the job?
Oh.
You can count on one or two hands, right? Yeah, okay.
On one hand.
But you have plenty of experience. You know what you're talking about in this portfolio. There's no doubt about that.
Totally.
Could I also welcome Djapu Elder Yananymul Mununggurr, who's a director of the Yothuyindifoundation as well. Toby Nganbe is from the Thamarrur Development Corporation. I've probably pronounced that wrong, haven't I? Yeah, that's good. All right, thanks, Toby. And Denise Bowden, you all know, the CEO of the Yothuyindifoundation as well. Thank you, Denise. I think before we chart the pathway forward, or at least talk about how to chart the pathway forward, it's worth just having a quick look at where we're at, where we've come from over the last nearly 10 months. Yananymul, perhaps to you, and I'll get some quick thoughts from everybody. How would you describe where we're at in the wake of the referendum defeat?
Where we're at now, I think, after the referendum, where we're at now, as Yolngu people, we're at a stage where we are thinking about what the next steps are. And this is something we discussed yesterday. What is the next steps after the referendum? This is a very important question for us. And we just thinking our country is in the process of burning. Our country is being burnt.
Burning.
Burning. That's the theme for Garma this year. and and as the country is burning, for that, after that will come, rejuvenation, the plants, the animals, and we're at that stage, the Yolngu people. Yeah, huh?
Still in the burning, or at the
no,
time
still
for
in the
rejuvenation
burning.
Still
That
burning.
time will come.
Okay.
That time will come, and it's not long.
Yeah.
It's just around the corner, and we are thinking. What is the next steps for the Yolngu? Because when it comes to the country is also telling us, telling the Yolngu people, we're the only ones who understands what's going on. And for us, when we're thinking about this, what is the next steps? We gotta, regroup as Yolngu people, regroup, talk about what it is we want to achieve. Yes, we didn't win the referendum, and that's something we will acknowledge. It's happened. What's happened in the past has happened, but we're not gonna, cry over that for a long time. I think we're in that stage where we're talking about our children. This is very, very important. It's the future for our communities, the future of our children, our Jamarkuli. We got to do something about that. And we are the people now that's going to, do something. Do something and working together. I've heard my countrymen, the people that was in the previous session talk about this. We got to talk about regrouping, gathering, unity, and then come together as one people, Yolngu people. And this is something we would want to, we would like to achieve. This is something I'm saying to the new incoming minister. Take this on board. We want to work with you. And there's a lot of things that is required for us.
We'll come back to the minister and get some thoughts from you, Minister, on where you think we're at. But Denise, what are your thoughts? I think you did use the word silence that we've been in. Is that frustrating you?
Yes. I think there's a lot of silence, given there was some real soul-crushing time that people had to get through. So perhaps, that's apt at the moment. But we need to break through that. I feel as if, yes, the rejection was happened. Perhaps that was supposed to happen. I find that is a result in itself.
What do you mean by that? I find that interesting.
Well, it's an answer that wasn't here before. So the nation spoke, and I think that's progress in a certain way, because we didn't have that answer before. Now it's on the record. What do we do with that moving forward? How do we manage that responsibly as a nation so that we don't go backward? So whilst we may not like what the result was in certain parts, some people do. Some people obviously disagree with that. So is there an education campaign that's required moving forward? How do we do this together? And how do we make sure that we're managing the messaging so everybody doesn't go helter-skelter moving forward?
All right. Toby, how would you describe where we're at?
We've come a long way as Aboriginal people and non-Indigenous people. We've come a long way. searching for what needs to be done in this country, coming together. And I think we went there. And like Denise said, the nation has spoken. So the next step for us is to not let it go. We must continue to work together, to come together. Things like what we're doing right now is very important. We come to you, you come to us. That's what is needed in this country. No more of this blame game. Let's move on. Let's keep the fire burning.
Well, Minister, what's your take on where we're at? You fought very hard for the yes case. It wasn't to be. Where are we now?
Yes, we certainly did fight very hard, David, and I'd like to thank all Australians who supported us in the yes movement to do everything we could to try to win the referendum. And listening to my fellow panellists here, and especially with Yananymul, about the country is burning, I think there's a really beautiful analogy here, and I just think it's really important that people actually understand what Yananymul's saying around that. Every dry season time, it's time to burn off country after the wet season, so that, as she said, things can regenerate, but also food comes through, healthy living, a plan to prepare, to store again for the build-up and the wet season and what's to come. But it's also another analogy which Tobias used, and that is keep the fire burning is the NAIDOC theme. And for many First Nations people, that's about keeping the strength, resilience, passion, determination burning for justice, for our voices to be heard. And this gathering this weekend has been really important for so many of us, and myself included, because we see this opportunity to reset, to regather, to listen and renew, especially from my perspective now in the federal cabinet, to take that back to the federal parliament. We had a real message provided to us many years ago that Prime Minister Albanese took in all sincerity when he listened to the late Mr Yunupingu. And he said, yes, we will take this to the people. But as Denise has said, the nation has responded. So how do we move forward from here? Well, from my perspective, and I'm very thankful to be in this role, and I certainly commend the work of Linda Burney and the outstanding work she did as the Minister for Indigenous Affairs to pursue this path on so many levels, but in particular in the referendum. Now it's time to reach across the political divide and ensure that Indigenous affairs isn't the political football that we have seen used so treacherously at times, so hurtfully. And I will do my utmost to certainly reach across that divide.
And I'd like to come back to that pitch that you're making for bipartisanship in the week or so that you've been in the job. But I'm very interested in getting some sort of sense from everyone on the panel. We know the voice went down, but there were other elements to the Uluru Statement, Makarrata, truth-telling, treaty, and there's still this outstanding question of recognition in the Constitution. Yananymul, perhaps to you first. What's the status now of the rest of the Uluru Statement? Is that still what you're after, or do you go back to the drawing board? Is it a blank sheet of paper once more?
No, it's there, you know, the Yirrkala petition, the Uluru Statement, the Barunga Statement, it's all there, you know, it's all been set up by the people who was, you know, heavily involved in those movements. And it's there, it's written in paper, it's, I don't know, somewhere hanging in Parliament where, I don't know. But it's there, you know, and it's there for the government in power today, and it's there for the government, the new government.
And that's still what
for
you
the
would like to
future.
see.
It's always there.
Yeah.
It's there as a reminder for the governments to, take in consideration those statements that was made by the Aboriginal people, and it's the voices of the people that was involved, our elders. Having said all that, us today, we always talk about, we're always referring to those statements and what needs to be done,
Well, let me throw it to both of you, Denise and Toby, as well. Is it still clear what Indigenous Australians want, or is there some need for a post-referendum fresh process to determine where to go, or do you think it's still very clear what's expected?
I think it is clear to me where, like I said before, we went through a lot, and we need to move on. There's about coming together. I mean, living in a remote country, community out in the bush, there's got to be an openness of sharing information. We've got to open up. People living in towns and cities, and these Aboriginal people I'm talking about, they've got the things that they need to inspire them in what they want. For us out in the bush, that's less, if nothing. So what these two cultures need to come together and share what it is that we want as Aboriginal people. It's been a long time coming, so let's get together. Let you come to Wayawu. Let you come to my homeland and see who I am. Not as Tobias, no, not as Tobias, but as Nganbe. That's my original name. My proper name is Nganbe. You look at me that way and you will understand me properly. You will not understand me as Tobias. So I think it's important that we begin. We've begun, but we again make a fresh start. Make a fresh start where everyone work together, all hands together.
A fresh start, you're saying.
A fresh start.
Okay. Denise?
I agree, Tobias, absolutely. Given what is the largest Indigenous community in the Northern Territory, your thinking is spot on. And now, I heard now this morning, and I'm hearing refreshing. I want to make a point. Petitions have been a regular occurrence from this region. So messaging in culturally appropriate ways is not something new. As recent as the 2019 Garma Festival, the youth also put through a youth Uluru Statement from the Heart that was signed here and went around the country. More signatures were placed on that. I think that's sitting over in the Knowledge Centre this year. Have a look at it. I fear that we are continuously going to be putting petitions and statements to Parliament that aren't heard and are put on a shelf. And the voice was called the voice for a reason.
So, Minister, what's the government's position now on those remaining elements of the Uluru Statement, Makarrata, Treaty? What's the position?
The Prime Minister made the commitment to the three elements of the Uluru Statement from the Heart: voice, treaty, truth. That hasn't changed. Even though we lost the referendum, we still remain committed to the three elements of the Uluru Statement from the Heart.
So that includes Makarrata. I just want to tell you what Peter Dutton has just said. He's been talking to reporters in WA. I'll get the exact quote here, but he has made it clear to the voters of WA, he says, to the people of WA, under a government I lead, there will be no Makarrata. There will be no revisiting of truth-telling, and he also has a whack at the money spent on the Voice referendum. What's your reaction to that?
Well, it just shows the challenge I have in front of me, doesn't it? To reach out across the political divide. What we don't want to see in this country is the hatred and the hurtfulness that occurred throughout the referendum, and I, for one, will not accept that. We have to have this discussion and dialogue in a respectful way, and I will continue to push that. We are here this weekend on this beautiful Yananymul country at Gulkula to again listen deeply as a government, but also to take it forward in terms of progress for First Nations people across this country. And unless there is respectful dialogue with First Nations people, we can only still stay in the same place. And that's a place of despair, and nothing changes. And I certainly will not be a part of that.
So when you say you want to seek bipartisanship with Peter Dutton, is that someone you can seek or work with?
One of the things that I've found, David, is as I've grown up in the Gulf country, we have 4 language groups, the Yanyua, the Garwa, the Mara and the Gurangi peoples. And I've grown up knowing that to navigate a peaceful way through those 4 clan groups, the Jungai, the Nyimringi, that's just been our way through kinship. And then having to navigate as I travel across the territory with over 100 Aboriginal languages I don't even speak. But I use interpreters because I respect the fact I need to understand what those communities are asking for. I will persevere. And it's not just about Peter Dutton. There are over 200 politicians in that federal parliament, and they can make a difference in the positive for First Nations people in this country. And I aim to work with everyone.
But you're talking a lot this past week about bipartisanship.
Absolutely.
That means the coalition, right?
Absolutely. It does mean the coalition, but it also means the Greens. It even means One Nation. It even means the Teals and the crossbenchers and the independents. I'm determined to do that, to reach out to them once we get back to Parliament. We see the high rates of suicide of our people and the high rates of incarceration, and we cannot accept that that's okay. Yet we sit in front of our screens and watch our Olympians succeed at the highest of levels with beautiful gold medals. And we are a great nation, a brilliant nation, and how is it that we cannot close these targets?
And I want to come to those close the gap figures, but just to be clear on this, when you say you want bipartisanship, does that suggest you're not willing to take steps unless you have that cooperation, or are you still willing to do what you believe is needed to fix these problems?
Well, it will be a journey, David. Clearly, reaching out to each of those crossbenchers and each of the different individuals, whether it's in the coalition or other minor parties, will take a real strength and drive for me, my team, to do that.
Does that mean
if I may, but what that means is closing the gap targets. Let's look at the closing the gap targets. You know, there are so many targets there that are not being met. We as a country must look at that. The fact that people said no in the referendum meant, in my view, that they accepted the status quo. Well, one of the status quo is trying to close the gap in the targets. So what I'll be reaching out to in each of my conversations is about closing the gap targets.
And will you sit down with Jacinta Nampijinpa-Price, your opposite number?
Oh, well, Senator Nampijinpa-Price and I, you know, we travel in different places across the territory. We see each other. We do talk to each other. It's okay, people. You know, it's, it's pretty dignified, and I will reach out to her. I think it's important to remember that, you know, we are a democracy. We do have different views, but what I will be asking for is let's find what we have in common here.
You obviously don't have in common, though, Makarrata. That's very clear. Treaty, that's very clear. Is there any role for the federal government in these issues, or are you talking about this happening at the local level?
What I'm talking about is the closing the gap targets. When I say I'm reaching out,
Not Makarrata or treaty.
closing the gap targets.
Okay.
I feel I need to see a change in that. That is something that, as I said, the high rates of suicide that we have in this country and the high rates of removal of our children requires a collective bipartisan approach to those targets.
Okay, but not those other elements of the Uluru Statement.
Have you seen how many targets there are, David? There's
No,
a
and
lot.
I'm coming to those.
But I think, please give me time. I've only been in the job
Okay.
4 days.
All right, but Denise, is that good enough, do you think? Toby's got a very important phone call here. We'll just make sure you clear that away. Denise, is that good enough from the federal government to focus now on closing the gap rather than Makarrata, treaty, leave that to others?
Yeah, it's a very good question, David. Look,
You can
closing...
speak freely, Denise.
The Yothuyindifoundation has been very outspoken about these type of matters, right? And Tobias has mentioned it here before. The bush is very different from the cities. We see different types of challenges. And if you're not here on the ground, if you're not in Wadair or you're not in Arnhem land, how do you know how to approach this? So Minister McCarthy is Borroloola woman. She knows the territory. I think she's got some very good capacity, absolutely, to push these things forward, and we fully support her moving forward. However, we are talking impoverishment, disadvantage, very remote regions, massive challenges. We've spoken about education today. Those are all closing the gap challenges, right? It's all wrapped up in there. I mean, I don't mind how we get to this solution, but we have got to find improvements, and we've got to not just talk about it or let it play out in the media. It's the step-by-step approach to continuously keep going back and getting those outcomes so that we're not bottlenecking. And when we bottleneck, Minister McCarthy will come along and she'll remove the congested parts. And then we'll keep going and we will keep moving forward so that we can see the better outcomes. Call it what you may, whether it's Makarrata, treaty, closing the gap, it's all about making those improvements for better lives and for the next generation.
Sounds like... It sounds like you're comfortable with the priority right now being closing the gap in a practical sense.
Look, can we talk about the Productivity Commission report? Because, I mean, I gave an interview the other day and I'm really actually not surprised by those findings. And I mentioned that I'm kind of immune to these statistics that keep coming back. I'm immune to seeing those results all the time, and it's now become almost like a social norm that it's accepted. So where is the trigger mechanism to say, no more, that's not good enough, and we need to collectively, and I'm hearing this collaboration component, has to be a collaboration to do this together rather than playing it all out in the media, whether you agree with it or you don't agree with it. We're just wasting time. Can we move on, please?
So the Productivity Commission report during the week, you're right, pretty familiar and pretty depressingly familiar. There was a bit of progress in 5 areas that are on track. There was less progress on another 5 areas that aren't on track. And then we're actually going backwards on suicide rates, incarceration rates, child removal into out-of-home care. Tobias, you're there on the ground. You see what's working and what's not. Can you give an explanation as to why we're seeing such little progress in closing the gap? Again,
It's information gathering. It's not on the ground at Wadair. Wadair has voted the most yes for the yes vote. But by doing that, we understand how important it is for people in government to hear us in the bush. And Wadair has the most young people in jail. in Darwin right now. And that is very sad, and that's very sad. I've seen a lot of communities such as this, where there's things going on to try and help the young people get jobs, get trained up to do something worthwhile for their life, in their life. And that is, for me, Kate, I've worked all my life, so I can see what's going on. I can see what's going on. And it's this lack of service, lack of something that needs to be done in the Thamarrur region.
What are some examples of that, the practical services that you're talking about? There's a territory election just around the corner, a federal one not too far off. What services are you lacking?
I'm an educator. I've worked all my life as an educated person, teacher. So the first thing that comes to mind, education. Education is very important, as we know. Now, for us, it comes in two ways. Our way, Curry way, and the Western way. If you want to move on, if I want my grandson to move forward in life, I've got to make him understand who he is first. That's number one. Who he is my grandson. That's number one. Number two, he's got to know where he come from, where's his root is. In this case, we call it Nangimalmen, the root of a tree. Once we do that, and make young Johnny understand what it is that he's facing, he's got to understand himself first. That's all it is, that's all it is. And then you move forward to this new way that's coming in, which we can't really escape. Coming together in that way, that's giving this young kid an opportunity to do the things that any normal kid, I shouldn't say kid no, but a child can do. So, in my mind, it's always hard when you're trying to explain something to another person who doesn't speak Morimbata, which is hard. Bilingual education came along. It's good. But sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes when in a bilingual education, I'm sorry, but there's a white teacher in there. And this other, the Aboriginal teacher don't feel comfortable in doing what they need to do. And there's a barrier in there. So they collide and they go against each other. But I know when there's a school break, when there's time for us to go out bush to our country, that's the time you see the real little John, the real person, who he is. It's out in the bush, out in his country, not in whatever, no. It's all mixed. So we will be going around in circle. And sometimes we do not make the decision of where this education is heading. Very hard. There's always someone in Darwin saying to us, no, you listen to me, I know what's best for you. I know what's best for you. Okay, I can understand that because it's your way, it's your education way. But you got to stop saying that and come to me and work with me to come up with a solution. To come up with a solution where young Johnny can understand what you're teaching him about. Don't brainwash him and do this and that and that. come up with a solution where you make him ready. You make him ready as a person, not as a child, but as a person, an Aboriginal person. And that's very, very, very. Look, they keep holding on to us, and they keep holding on to us. They want to try and control us. No, they can't help themselves. They want to do that. So stop it, eh? Stop it. Stop it right there. And come with us. Again, I'm saying come with us. That's very important.
I think you've just given a pretty powerful example of the very thing that the Productivity Commission itself has pointed to, and not just in this week's report, but for quite some time, and that's shared decision making. It says shared decision making, where it's happening, is delivering better results. It says government, state and federal talk about it, but not a lot is changing, not enough is changing on the ground. Yananymul, what are your thoughts on shared decision making, and is it actually happening? Is it happening here to the degree that it needs to?
No. There's no such thing as shared decision making that exists. You know, with our people and the people in power, the government in power. You know, we've talked about there's that talk about local decision making with the Northern Territory government, and that's at the territory level. Me personally, we've been asking for that. We've been trying to, you know, come up with our own agreement, but we are not there yet. Because the government, this is territory government, and the Chief Minister's office, they don't know what they do. They don't know what to do. When it comes to the federal government, I'm being honest here. This is truth-telling. There's nothing in place.
Shared decision-making?
No shared decision-making. You know, when it comes to the closing the gap, Minister, when it comes to housing, and this is housing for homelands, housing for the major communities, the decision-making is in Darwin. We don't get much to say in that, you know. We don't know how they distribute funds, what the formula of the funding is. You know, all the decision-making is there. The decision that the federal government made was between the Northern Territory government, and they're the ones sitting in Darwin making all the decisions for us, and then they tell us, here's your rupiah money for housing. You know, this is the sort of thing that is happening now. Even when it comes to implementing policies for Aboriginal people, we don't have a say in that.
Well, Minister, what's your reaction to that?
Well, thanks, Yananymul. And David, I think this shows just the real clear conundrum, doesn't it? Because the whole purpose of going to the referendum was to be able to give that voice, so that First Nations people would be, certainly at the federal level, a part of that decision making. And so that's why we're here now at this point, to work out, well, how can we, post the referendum, with the no vote, have that shared decision making when everything was put towards the hope for that voice. And again, that's what I have to unpack.
Do you need some sort of advisory body? It may not be enshrined in the Constitution, it may not be, you know, exactly the structure that you had in mind, but you need some sort of representative body or advisory body that can tell you what you need to know?
Look, I think the Prime Minister just made it really clear when we lost the referendum that there was no way it would go ahead in terms of having a legislative voice, because the Australian people had made a decision, and we, you know, whether we like it or not, we obviously stand by and respect that decision. So what I will have to do, in particular with the injection of funds that's certainly coming to the Northern Territory is work out how we can have shared decision making, in particular over the $4 billion housing program over the next 10 years. So there are many things that I need to have a look at.
Are you saying you haven't worked that out yet? I mean, I know you're just in the job, but the government hasn't worked out. You've been the Assistant Minister. The government doesn't know how to do shared decision making on this big housing thing that you've announced for the Northern Territory.
Sure. The announcement was just last month. That signing was also between the Northern Territory Government, the 4 land councils, and also the Northern Territory Aboriginal Housing program here in the Northern Territory. So they will determine that shared decision making, and I know Yananymul is with the Northern Land Council, so they will be a part of that, yes.
Does that satisfy you, Yananymul?
Can I say something, Minister? And this is in relation to the $4 million or $4 billion housing. I think we need to know about the details. We've been fighting for homelands housing for a long, long time. I'm nearly going to drop dead now. I've been going on for a long, long time, and it's not just only me. A lot of people across the Northern Territory wants housing. Old man there from his corporation, Thamarrur Aboriginal Corporation, they've been fighting for housing for a long time, for homelands. So, to get away from what's happening at Port Kitts, we know that story. And his people, they've been fighting for housing for homelands. Yeah? But there's, and this is me, there's politics going on with the territory government and the federal government. And that, so, the two governments, the territory and the federal governments, needs to put their act together. And, stop playing politics with us. We've been here for a long time. You know our frustrations, Minister. You now got that portfolio. And we need you to stand by us, help us with, what we are talking about, what we need to see for homelands as well as our main communities, right? The main communities, the number of Yolngu people, kids are being born in our communities, right? Children, there's new children growing up, and the governments, both governments, needs to invest housing in that area as well. And I know there's been projects happening at Gulkula and Galiwinko, Remo, all across the East Arnhem land. But you have to think about the future as well. Think about the future, because when it comes to our people, whether we live in the main communities or our homeland, our numbers are growing. Our numbers are growing. What they say about the number of Yolngu people across East Arnhem land is not true. Some people aren't counted for when it comes to the Australian Bureau of Statistics. Our numbers are growing, and we need to see more infrastructure coming into our communities. More infrastructure, and our roads as well, Minister McCarthy. You've been on the homelands roads,
Yep,
people. I think some people here they've been travelling the Central Arnhem Road. I don't know what you think about it, but I think it needs to be fixed up. And the access roads to homelands, it needs to be fixed up. Our airstrips, it needs to be fixed up. We've been lobbying for these, something to build our communities for a long, long time, and only, we're not seeing that much investments coming into our communities. Some people say that, Aboriginal people getting a lot of taxpayers' money. That's bullshit, I must say. Eh? And sorry for using that word, but you know.
Bit of truth-telling going on.
Truth-telling,
on stage,
yes.
Right. Denise,
yes.
Let me come to you. Just it kind of gets back to where we were talking earlier about the way forward. This session is about the pathway forward. The Minister obviously wants more shared decision-making, but still needs to work out how best for that to happen. How quickly, I mean, look at the statistics this week on closing the gap. How quickly does this need to be sorted out?
I mean, this should have been done yesterday, a long time ago, right? But here we are, we're still talking. We're caught in this vicious cycle of just constantly talking. And I mentioned before the action part is missing. We keep going around and round in a circle. The Northern Territory, as Yananymul correctly said, has experienced lax infrastructure for so long. And that has never been really a focal point. The Northern Territory seems to be kind of handballed into the too hard basket sometimes. I find the best results that we get in northeast Arnhem Land is when we do it ourselves, and then the focus becomes somewhat of a success, and then you get the support after that.
Right.
It'd be really lovely to get the support prior to, have a strategic approach to it, collaborate. But I think a massive investment needs to be considered, given that it's the region has constantly been, reiterating we need this, we need that. We have a 13 Diluk clan cultural authority here. Yananymul is one of those Diluk senior members. And again, unsealed roads, housing, better health. In this Garma booklet here, you'll see that there's a focus this year on rheumatic heart disease. And on one of these pages is a pattern, and the pattern tells you where the yes vote was returned and where the no vote was returned. And it looks to me like the top of Australia has returned a majority yes vote, and that tells me that people are crying out for need. They're challenged by the remoteness, they're challenged by the lacks of infrastructure, they're challenged by, resourcing. So I have an office in Darwin. I can travel the Tiger Brennan Drive Road anytime I want. And when there's a pothole, I'll get it fixed because the City Council's there to do that. When you become far removed from the population, it's harder to do those things. So a strategic approach really does need to be looked at. I think that pattern tells you where an advisory group could stem from and why that yes vote was so heavily supported.
Just tease out that thought for me. An advisory group stemming from the parts of the country with the strong yes vote.
Well, if you look at that program booklet, you can see the top end of Australia. The top of Australia is, and in very remote places, are saying we need help. You've not listened to what we've been saying for so long. Here's our opportunity to provide you with the solutions to move forward. But if you don't have skin in the game to do that, and if you don't have the ability to kick in and get those outcomes, we're not going to go anywhere. We're going to keep floundering.
Just looking at the time, I would like to, if we can, find some areas of hope, areas of success. Perhaps it is through shared decision-making where you're seeing good things delivered. I'm sure, Minister, you might have an example or two. Why don't we start with you? What should we be looking at to give us hope?
Well, I'll use my previous example in the health space. We're working with the Aboriginal community health sector across Australia, and the way the Aboriginal community health sector operates, I think, is an outstanding model. Yes, there are some areas where there are issues, but overall, when I look at the number of organisations across Australia, I see that collaborative work of First Nations people determining the ways that they want to improve the health of their people. And that is an outstanding model to look at. and with government working closely with them. And that's something that we did when I held the previous portfolio of Assistant Minister in Indigenous Health, with 500 traineeship positions that we announced earlier this year, and we see now over 300 of those positions filled, because we want to see more Aboriginal health worker clinicians in that space. The same with the rolling out of renal dialysis machines. We've had to work at two levels. One is the chronic kidney disease, and knowing that our people do not want to be away from country, so working on the fact that we could put in renal dialysis chairs, but at the same time looking at the preventative, because we have too many of our people going on renal dialysis, so we have to do both. We need to help the people who are currently in that situation and prevent the ones going into it. I've been with the Torres Strait Island doctors on Torres Straits. 20 years ago we had one doctor. Now we have 20 Torres Strait Island doctors. I think we've got over 500, if not 800, Donna, Indigenous doctors across Australia. So I find the health space is one that I want to use the example of working into other areas of First Nations.
Yananymul, are there any examples you would give that should encourage us, give us hope? Any examples of where we're seeing progress and areas of hope?
You saw the children this morning. There's hope for those kids. Yolngu people across East Arnhem region, we're trying to do our best when it comes to the education of our Thamarrur, of our children, in our main communities, in homelands where I am. We have a successful secondary education program which is being delivered at a homeland. And look at those areas where there is progress, and work from there. We are trying to do what's best for our community. We're not just sitting down whinging about everything. But I asked the government, both the Territory and the Northern Territory government, we are trying to do, we are in that process, and there's been, successes in our communities, right? Coming from leaders who's, worked their heart out for the betterment of our communities. Right? There's progress in education. There's still more work to be done in the health sector. There's still more work to be done in infrastructure. There's still more work to be done, when there's lacking in services. Okay. And when we say to the government, we want these, we want the government to stand with us, help with us, they should listen to us. Listen to us, what we want to achieve, and work from where we what we are doing already, right? Like in the education space. I think we're going down the right track when it comes to education. Okay. But there's still more work to be done in the other parts of the industry.
What about Tobias? Are there examples you could share with us where you are seeing progress?
In Wayawu, we've got 20 clan group, 20 clan. In Wayawu, one of the progress that is happening now is everyone seems to be talking to each other now, which hasn't been done for a very long time. There's always conflict between clans. So what I'm seeing now in moving forward is we're coming together, we're listening to each other. We're trying to make decisions as a clan, as the 20 clan group. So that's very good.
And Denise?
Yananymul summed it up very nicely. Education is so strong here in our region. We had the Prime Minister support the Garma Institute last year, and we've made quite considerable progress. Having said that, that has been a dream of over 2 decades plus. But listen, we're here, and we'll move forward, and we're going to create something absolutely amazing.
Good to hear. Look, would you please thank Denise, Tobias, Yananymul, and the Minister. And I think it's fair to say we do appreciate now's not necessarily the easiest time to come into the portfolio. It's been a frank conversation, and we do really appreciate you giving us the time, Malarndirri McCarthy.
Thank you, David.
And thanks for coming along. We'll see you soon.